The state of Florida has so much wildlife and nature to enjoy, and there's no better place to start looking for it than Polk County. If you're at home looking for something to do with your family, exploring nature is fun, free, and good for your health. Today in studio, we have Paul Thomas, a fisheries biologist from the Fishing and Wildlife Conservation Commission in Lakeland, to talk about his organization and how it helps Polk County residents. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing great, Dion. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. So start off by telling me a little bit about what your organization is and what you guys aim to do on a regular basis.
The Fish and Wildlife Commission is the state agency that's in charge of managing, monitoring, protecting, and researching all of the natural resources, all of the outdoors, all of the critters that live there, and the habitats that they live in. Our mission statement, if you look at it, is to manage natural resources for their long-term well-being and the benefit of people. And that second piece is added there because all fish and wildlife agencies in this country, including ours, are more or less self-funded by our user groups. In other words, if you fish, you buy a fishing license. You hunt, you buy a hunting license. You do outdoor activities, you buy a pair of binoculars, a kayak. All of those things, all of the money that you spend there has a way of coming back into that agency, whatever state you're in, and it helps fund those programs so that the things that you like to do outdoors are going to be there further on.
Yeah, absolutely. So. That's important for the wildlife for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How long has that been in motion? How long have you guys been around?
Well, we've been here since 1948, and we're a little unique because there's only a few state agencies, fish and wildlife agencies, that have been constitutionally created by their state constitution. And what that means is that we are as removed from the political process as we can be when it comes to making fish and wildlife decisions.
Okay.
So as a biologist, I gather data, I make recommendations, those go up to our commission, which is made up of 7 commissioners, and they can only make their decisions for that resource based on the information that we give them. Okay. So you don't have a lot of outside interference, or as little as possible.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's unique, because a lot of other states don't have that kind of autonomy, if you will.
Okay. And are you able to tell me how that kind of came about for Polk County then, if that's different from other states? Or?
Well, Polk County, we're part of the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. We have a headquarters here for what's called the Southwest region, and Polk County is part of 12 counties that's my territory, that's where I work. Polk County, from a fisheries standpoint, if you like to recreational fish, this is the place to go. The #1 sport fish in the state of Florida, in either fresh or salt water, is largemouth bass. Mm-hmm. More anglers spend more time and more money on the water trying to catch bass than any other fish. Polk County is Bass Fishing Central. We sell more freshwater fishing licenses here. The state record fish, 17 pounds 4 ounces, came out of this county. It's a pretty big deal.
I would say so,
it's from the economy side, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 to $52 million a year is generated by recreational fishing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal for sure.
It's in our best interest, not only for the fish and the wildlife, but for everybody who lives here, it's in our best interest to keep those resources as healthy as we can.
For sure.
So.
And what is your role within the organization specifically?
Depends on the day.
Okay.
I wear a lot of hats,
but
specifically, take it down to kind of the nuts and bolts. I'm one of the biologists that goes out and gathers data, gathers information, that goes into those fishing regulations that you're supposed to follow. Mm-hmm. I'm the guy that does the science, that makes the regulations. One of my other divisions, law enforcement, they're the guys that enforce it.
Okay.
So it's kind of the same thing, just a different side of the regulation, and I don't have to carry a side piece when I'm out in the field.
Now,
I'm the good guy.
That's nice to have, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to write you a ticket. I'm probably just going to give you good advice.
Okay, good. Don't make any enemies then.
Right. Yeah, I kind of like life like that.
Now, wildlife is not necessarily a career that a lot of people think of initially. It's not necessarily the first thing that they think of. When did you spark your interest in wildlife, and how did you find a career in that?
It really goes back to when I was a kid. I was blessed that my parents took us camping. We camped all over the United States. We were always outdoors, mm-hmm. Boating, fishing, hiking, wildlife watching. So I had an interest very, very early on. Didn't really think of it as a career for a long time, though. I was actually an art major first.
Oh.
And then I got into the optical industry, and so I thought I'll be an eye doctor. Yeah. And then I realized that I was gonna end my career, and I would never know which is better, one or two. So I had an uncle in the Forestry Service. We had a really good friend who was a park manager up in Michigan, where I grew up. And I really started looking at what those guys did, and I realized there were some career opportunities there. So I started looking at different universities. Ended up at Michigan State. If we have any Big Ten viewers out there, or University of Michigan, I'm just going to say 89-73 Saturday night basketball. Go green. And I saw they had a really good fish and wildlife program. Went over there, talked to some of the professors, said, wow, this is really cool. This is what I really want to do. The very first course you take is sort of a weed out course, Fish and Wildlife 301, and it makes you realize, do you want to go into fisheries or do you want to go into wildlife management? And fisheries was actually just more interesting. The science was more interesting. There were a few more jobs available, and it was going to be out on the water a lot, which I really enjoy. Went through that. This is way back before the internet, so we had this thing called a job board, and different states and organizations would send job opportunities, and there'd be a little index card that would be thumbtacked to the job board. And I saw one for Florida. I went, oh, where is that? Lakeland. Ah, I think I was there. I'd been to Florida one time, 1977. Came down and went to Cypress Gardens, went out on Lake Eloise, fell in love with it. Actually ended up doing a painting for one of my sisters of the sunset on Lake Eloise. Oh, nice. Which now sits in my house. But I always thought this would be a great place to come back to. So when I saw where the job was, I applied, came down here, got an interview. Here I am, almost 30 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it stuck, right?
It did. Yeah,
you enjoyed it.
I do, and I could never go back to living in the cold again. So much rather be hot and uncomfortable and sweat than really cold and freezing.
Yeah, of course. Don't want to be stuck in the blizzards and whatnot, right?
That's right. It's easier to drive in rain than it is snow and ice.
Absolutely. So. Now, you guys have some partnerships with some college programs, which we're going to touch on later, a specific one. But talk to me about some of the learning opportunities and the opportunities to get involved in nature that you have for college students. We have
a few internships where, as an agency, we're still working on developing that. So there are internships available. There are part-time positions, seasonal positions available. For instance, I have 2 or 3 in any given year creel clerks, which are, they go out and do angler surveys on the water. And that's usually 3 or 4 months. But if somebody wants to get experience, it's going to look good on a resume. If you're going into the outdoors, that's a really good opportunity for somebody. And it's not a bad gig, you get to drive around in a boat, you get to talk to people, you're outside. It's pretty cool. Yeah. And then we're working with some other organizations to get some more specific, things going on. Okay. So now, if someone wants to get involved with that program you were talking about first, how did they go about getting involved with it? They contact our office, and then they would get a hold of me or one of my colleagues there. Okay. So, or you can also look on My People, or, oh gosh, I always forget it. Hang on. People First, which is that's our state website, and there's 2 halves to it. There's the agent or the employee side, and then there's the job side. And they go into the job side, and they can search through by career. You can search through by area. Like you could say, okay, how many fisheries positions are there available now in Polk County? And you could go in there and look there. Okay. For me, because I'm old school, call the office, talk to us. A little more personal. It's a little more personable that way, right? Okay. Now, if someone's a college student and they're going to get involved with you guys with an internship or something like that, what kind of skills would they learn in that? What would they get their hands on? That's a good question, because let me back up. I also mentor a lot of high school students. I have an internship program with one of the local high schools that I've done for, probably 15 years now. That's great. First thing I do with the kids that come in is, okay, how many of you like to hunt or fish? And most of their hands go up. How many of you like to deal with people? Most of the hands stay down. All right, because the school of thought is, if I'm going to go into the outdoors, I want to go, save sea turtles, I want to go work with alligators, I want to swim with manatees, whatever it is, okay? It's the critter or the outdoors that they're focused on, and they think, well, I really don't like dealing with people. Yeah. Well, in the 21st century, you can't do anything and not deal with people, particularly in a state like this. We're the 3rd largest state by population now. And that population has a huge impact on those natural resources. So if we're not able to tell people what we're doing and why it's important to them, not only to the outdoors, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. So you're going to learn scientific skills, you're going to learn some hands-on stuff. We have to do a lot of our own mechanical work, small motor, automotive, boat trailers, working on equipment. So you've got kind of that mechanic side of it. You're going to learn public speaking. You got to learn how to deal with people. You got to learn how to talk to large groups and small groups and individuals like this without freezing. Oops, wait a minute.
You missed that class, right?
I did, yeah, I did miss that class. Because I don't like to talk to people. Actually, the public speaking class I had, when I tell the kids that was the most important class I ever had.
Yeah. Because
that is the skill that everybody needs in this profession. You got to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
That's, you're going to use a lot of math. Fish and wildlife programs have more math than a lot of engineering programs. It's just not the same math. It's usually population statistics and modeling, and it's really cool.
Nice.
Really cool stuff that we do. Fish and wildlife ID, ecosystem processes, basic science, physics, chemistry, you name it. We have a wide skill set, and then even if you don't go into this, you're going to look good no matter where you go. You're going to have a lot. You're going to bring a lot to a table. Yeah,
there's a lot more that goes into it than I would have thought.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now,
not just identifying fish.
Much more complex than that.
Yeah.
Now, you guys have a fraternity kind of partnership that you guys recently did, and we're going to touch on that and a little bit more of your conservation efforts in just a minute.
All right.
We're going to take a break first. Stay tuned for more with Paul Thomas on The Buzz.
So good to see you guys. So, what's up?
Oh, we finally bought a place.
Holy cow.
You seriously have enough saved to do that?
We've been putting a little aside each month.
Jeez, at the end of the month, we have nothing left to save.
Yeah, I have no idea where it goes.
Well, you're spending a lot on...
Was it good?
Oh, God.
Oh, how is my account overdrawn?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Thank you for joining me on The Buzz. Today in studio, I have Paul Thomas, a fisheries biologist from the Fishing and Wildlife Conservation Commission in Lakeland. So before the break, we talked a little bit about how a college student can get involved with the FWC. Now I want to kind of shift gears to a recent event that you guys held in partnership with a fraternity.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about who you're partnered up with and what the event was.
We partnered up with Phi Beta Sigma, which is one of the largest African American fraternities in the country. They're over 100 years old. They've done youth mentoring and leadership training since the 1950s. They've recently started branching out into outdoor careers and getting their kids involved in outdoor activities. It's kind of a new direction for them. They've got a memorandum of understanding with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the FWS, which is that's the federal program, Federal Fish and Wildlife. So that's the federal government out of Washington, D.C. Okay. So FWS is not the same as FWC. Similar, but they're bigger, and they're in some ways over us, or all the states. Okay. And through that MOU, FWS started getting those kids outdoors. Somewhere along the way in the last few months, the leadership of Phi Beta Sigma was put in touch with our leadership up in Tallahassee, because the Fish and Wildlife Service knew that we have a very strong commitment to youth programming and career advancement there. So they put them in touch with us. They said, hey, by the way, we're going to have our statewide conference for the fraternity is going to be in Lakeland in Polk County in January. Is there somebody or some way we could hook up with some of your staff down there and do some sort of an outdoor event? And so meant my phone rang, because that's what I've spent a lot of my career doing, is kids fishing and kids outdoor education. So I got in touch with the Phi Beta Sigma leadership. We worked out what we could do, what we couldn't do, how to get people there, you know, that kind of thing. And we ended up having a kids fishing and archery event up at Rock, which is one of our outdoor venues here just on the north side of Lakeland. They had close to 100 kids that they bussed in from Miami, Tallahassee, Tampa, and some local, and West Palm Beach.
Wow.
And the weather was horrible. It was cold and very windy, but the kids had a great time. And I'll say this, I've done thousands of youth events over the course of my career. This is one of the best ones I've ever done. These kids were just amazing, and it's because of the mentoring and the leadership they've been getting from the fraternity. I was really just blown away by the organization.
That's great.
So I really want to work with them again.
Awesome, yeah.
So.
That's good to build the partnerships with the people in the community like that. What kind of work were they doing with the kids? What were the different types of activities that they were doing?
We taught them basic archery, which again in a high wind is challenging, but those kids were better than me.
Wow.
I'm not an archer.
Okay.
They had a break. They did that in the morning. They had a break. They had an awards luncheon back at Polk State College, which is where they had their conference. And then they brought them back out to Rock for an afternoon of fishing. And by then the wind had died down a little bit, and it was actually a little bit warmer, you know. I mean, by Florida standards, it was still cold.
Of course.
We got the kids out. We gave them basic fishing instruction, got them out on the water, had a lot of good volunteers that were working with them, and they caught fish, and they want to come back. But what they get out of that, there's a little educational component. We talk to them about, you know, if you're 16 and older, you got to buy a fishing license, and here's where the money goes. It comes back to us, so that we can make sure that there's fish and natural resources out there for you to use. That's lesson one. Lesson two would be something called the Wallet Bro Fund, which is a federal tax on anything outdoors that you buy, like I mentioned earlier, binoculars, kayak, fishing gear, you know, rifles, shotguns. Tiny little bit of that money you spend goes into a federal pot, and that federal pot is divided up amongst all the 50 states every year. It's a matching fund, 3 of their dollars and 1 of our dollars. And our dollars is based on fishing license or fishing and hunting license sales. Florida's got a lot of people who like to hunt and fish. We also have a lot of water. That's the other component that they base it on, so we get a good chunk of that change so that we can put that back into our programs. That's brought over to the kids. And then we go way back and we talk about something that's the public trust doctrine. And I know that in your degree program you had that, right? Not so much.
I was like, I don't think so.
Public trust doctrine is the ancestor of all fish and wildlife programs.
Okay.
It actually goes back to the Romans. The Roman government said there are certain natural resources that are going to be available to the public all the time. In other words, not one millionaire back, I don't know what they called them back then. Would they be millionaires or lira heirs? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so the rich guys back in the Roman times couldn't own everything.
Okay.
And then that has evolved in different societies over time. It really started evolving in England to some degree. And then when our colonists came over, you know, back then you had a lot of things that were the King's Deer, the King's River. They said, no. We're going to go back to this public trust doctrine. We're going to make sure that the resources in our new country are going to be managed by the government that we set up, and they're going to be available to the public. And that's where you get fish and wildlife agencies, parks and recreation. That all comes from that very ancient philosophy. So we try to get that across to the kids too.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
that and fishing is fun, outdoor activities are fun, and there's careers here,
Yeah,
which
that's
are also fun.
definitely important to know
Yeah.
because, like I said, a lot of people don't necessarily think of that initially, and especially nowadays, it seems that kids are coming outside less and less, so they may not even have the
Right.
exposure without you guys giving it to them.
That's right, and that's why, again, as I said, our agency has a very strong commitment to youth. We have several different programs. We have the FYCCN, which is the Florida Youth Conservation Center Network, where we're building these outdoor educational centers, different areas around the state, where kids from schools and youth programs and that kind of thing will be able to go there, learn about Florida's outdoors. Hopefully we instill that stewardship in them so they not only learn, but they also care. because that's the next generation that's going to take care of whatever's Florida outdoors are going to look like then.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and for somebody like me, that's pretty important. I want, like my grandkids, I want them to still be able to go out and fish, to hike, to bike, to bird watch. If my granddaughter wants to hunt, I'm going to teach her how to hunt. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I remember taking plenty of field trips out to Tenor Rock, so I know that's a good experience for all the kids.
Good.
When I was in elementary school, being that I lived in Lakeland my whole
Right.
life, we took plenty of them, and
Good.
it was definitely good.
Yeah.
And a good time to get outdoors. It was always something to look forward to.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't just your standard field trip of, hey kids, let's go to a museum.
Yeah, it was
Not that
definitely more exciting.
that's
Yeah.
bad, but
Yeah, it was a little more hands-on, a little more exciting to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, being in nature conservation for your career, how has the interaction with nature and the way that people interact with it changed over the years from your perspective?
ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, has it changed with the education or?
It's changed because primarily in the last, say, 20 years, because of social media. Starting with the internet, there's a lot of things, a lot of outdoor opportunities that are there, but they would have, say, a limited market or a limited audience. All of a sudden, you had this information highway that, say, if you were a bass fishing guide on the Winter Haven chain, all of a sudden you could advertise there, and you start getting more clients from other states, other countries. We actually have a real strong connection in Central Florida, bass fishing to Japan, which is something not a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
And that grew out of that internet, and then the other social medias, Facebook, Twitter. Those are really the only two I'm familiar with. Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram.
Is that one?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, on the right track.
All right. All of those also have avenues, and so it's gotten more people exposed to more opportunities, and we're seeing a lot more people getting outdoors, not necessarily in the old traditional hunting and fishing roles, but they're getting out there and they're kayaking and they're biking and they're bird watching and they're doing nature photography, and they're camping and they're getting outdoors and they're going, wow, this really is cool. There is a value here, and that I see that stewardship value growing because of that, more so than say back in the twilight years of my career.
Now, why is it so important for not only college students, but students all through school when they're young to kind of start to realize the importance of wildlife conservation and to make that effort to get outdoors?
The outdoors affects everything that we do, and then vice versa. We have positive and negative impacts on fish and wildlife, and intrinsically humans have a connection to the outdoors. I mean, there's not too many people that even if you're just driving around, you go, oh look, there's a deer, or look at that bird. What is that? Right. So there's just that value right there. And in Florida, our quality of life here is closely tied to our natural resources. The number one reason people move to Florida, besides the warm sunshine and lack of winter, is our natural resources. Whether it's a beach or a river, or a lake, or hiking or biking. That's the number one reason. And we want to make sure that that's around. That next generation that's coming along, they're going to be the stewards of those resources. So I would not be doing my job if I wasn't trying to pass that along.
And with that said, what are some of the biggest efforts and biggest things that people in the younger generations can do to help work towards that effort?
Oh, wow.
I know there's probably an
That's
endless
a huge,
list, but
huge question. Basic things you can do everyday life, recycle. That's huge. If you're cutting your grass, don't let your lawn clippings go down a storm drain. That goes into water. That goes into our lakes and rivers, and that changes our water quality, and not for the better. If you're using herbicides or pesticides on your lawn or on your ornamental plants, make sure you're using it properly. That you're not getting a lot of runoff. There's negative impacts there. Try and use Florida-friendly plants, native plants in your landscaping. That benefits local neighborhood wildlife. If you like pets, if you've got a cat, let's say. And I'm a cat owner. Don't let your cat outside to hunt if you can do that, because neighborhood cats eat a lot of migratory birds. All those little songbirds that you see, the numbers are staggering. If you have a pet, say a pet snake, all right, or a goldfish, First of all, it's illegal for you to release that in the wild. So find another home for it. We have an amnesty program. This is kind of a sidebar, but we have an amnesty program for non-native critters that are pets. So let's say you went out and bought a boa back when you were in high school, and it was a foot long when you bought it.
Right.
Kind of cool, Your buddies come over and you watch it eat mice, and then pretty soon you're feeding it rats, and then the next thing you know you're feeding it rabbits. Now you're doing more rabbits, and the thing's 10, 12 feet long. Now what do you do with it?
Right.
Don't let it go in the wild, please. Find one of our amnesty days and we'll find a home for it.
Okay.
So just, non-native pet release, no. Non-native plants, if you can help it, use more native plants in your landscaping. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Buy a hunting and fishing license, because then that funds us, and then that makes us, be able to do our job a little bit better.
Of course. And one more question for you, and then we're about out of time.
Okay.
If someone is maybe interested in the outdoors, or they've come out to Tenor Rock and they kind of sparked an interest, but they're not necessarily on the career path, or they're not majoring in it, or
Right.
something like that, do you guys have volunteer opportunities where students can get involved?
We have a volunteer coordinator at our office. You can call the main number, 863-648-3200, and they'll put you in touch with him.
Okay.
And he will, kind of find out what your interests are, what we have available, and try and, do a best fit there.
Great.
So, or conversely, you can get a hold of me, because I use a lot of volunteers too, primarily in fishing programs. And so if you have an interest in fishing in the outdoors, you just want to come out and hang out with us and kind of see what it's like to be with the agency. It's a great way to do it. So,
Awesome.
And we can always use the help.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you
Okay.
for being here today.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
coming
for
out.
having me. I really appreciate it. I know the fraternity, the Phi Beta Sigma, they wanted to have somebody here, they couldn't. So hopefully I've done them a little bit of justice, but I'm telling you, that is a terrific program. So I'm looking forward to working with them in the future.
Great. You guys have a great cause.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today. If you've missed any parts of this episode, you can catch replays on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 1 and 7 p.m. on PGTV, or find us on our YouTube page, Polk Government. Thanks for joining me on The Buzz. We'll see you next time.